The first time my CEO held my arm and smiled like she loved me, my ex-wife stopped breathing. Not literally, of course. But I saw it happen across the bright glass ballroom, beneath the soft gold daylight pouring through the windows. One moment, Sienna Vale was laughing with a man in a gray suit, pretending I was nothing but a mistake she had outgrown. The next moment, my CEO, Maristella Quinn, leaned close to me, slipped her hand around my arm, and looked at Sienna with the calm confidence of a woman who had never begged anyone to stay. That was the moment my old life cracked open. And before this story begins, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when someone sees your worth before you do. My name is Orson Hale, and by the time I walked into the charity brunch that Saturday morning, I had already convinced myself I would survive it. I had survived worse. I had survived the divorce papers arriving in a blue envelope on the same day my mother's hospital bills doubled. I had survived moving from our sunlit townhouse into a small rented apartment above a bakery where the walls smelled like sugar and old rain. I had survived watching Sienna remove her wedding ring without crying, as if our 6 years together had been a dress she was tired of wearing. But surviving an event where my ex-wife would be present with half the city watching was different. The brunch was hosted at the Meridian House, a luxury hotel where sunlight fell across marble floors and everyone seemed polished enough to never have made a mistake. I was there because my company, Quinn and Rowe Developments, was one of the sponsors. I was not important enough to matter, but important enough to be seen. I managed project recovery, which meant I fixed disasters quietly while other people took credit publicly. Maristella Quinn, our CEO, was the kind of woman people lowered their voices around. She was young for her position, brilliant, feared, and impossible to read. She wore black that day, not because it was dramatic, but because she made everything look intentional. Her dark hair fell over one shoulder, her gold earrings caught the daylight, and when she entered a room, even wealthy men with louder watches suddenly remembered their manners. I had worked for her for 3 years, and in all that time, she had never asked me anything personal until 2 hours before the brunch. She found me standing near the service hallway, staring at my reflection in a silver tray and trying to decide whether the tired man looking back at me could pass for fine. "You hiding," she said. I turned so fast I nearly dropped my phone. She looked at me once, then toward the ballroom, where Sienna had just arrived in a white dress that made every head turn. My ex-wife looked beautiful. That hurt more than I expected. She looked rested. Expensive. Unbothered. The kind of woman who had convinced herself leaving me had been an upgrade. "She's your ex-wife," Maristella said. I did not ask how she knew. CEOs knew things. Assistants knew things. Divorce had a way of becoming office weather. "Yes," I said. "And the man with her?" "Probably someone she wants me to see." Maristella studied me for a second. "Do you still love her?" The question landed like a hand pressed against a bruise. I wanted to say no. I wanted to sound healed. But the truth was heavier than pride. "I loved who I thought she was," I said. Maristella's expression softened, but only slightly. "And who does she think you are?" I looked across the room at Sienna laughing too loudly. "A failure who got left behind." Maristella turned her gaze back to me. "Then let us correct the record." I thought she meant she would put me on stage or praise my work in front of sponsors. Instead, she stepped closer, adjusted the collar of my navy suit with unsettling gentleness, and said, "For the next hour, I am your girlfriend." I stared at her. "What?" "Not because you need revenge," she said. "Because some people only understand value when someone else claims it." I should have refused. I should have told her fake affection was childish, dangerous, ridiculous. But then I saw Sienna glance toward me, her eyes sliding over my suit, my empty hands, my loneliness, and I felt 6 years of being measured and found lacking. So I said nothing. Maristella took my arm. The room changed. People noticed immediately. They always noticed Maristella. They noticed her hand resting on my sleeve, her shoulder close to mine, the way she tilted her face toward me as if I were the only conversation worth having. She did not overact. That was what made it convincing. She simply gave me the kind of attention powerful people usually kept for mirrors and rivals. Sienna saw us when we reached the table. Her smile collapsed so quickly I almost felt guilty. The seating arrangement had been cruel by accident or design. Maristella and I were placed directly beside Sienna, who sat with her arms folded and her lips pressed tight. Behind her, several guests looked from her to me to Maristella, reading the scandal before anyone spoke it aloud. Maristella leaned into my arm and smiled. Sienna stared at her hand. I stared at Sienna. And the man behind us, some investor with a red face and a champagne glass, stood frozen with his mouth open like he had walked into the final scene of a movie. That was the exact moment captured in the thumbnail of my life. But what the picture did not show was my heartbeat. It did not show how badly my hands were shaking under the table. It did not show the memory of Sienna telling me I had become too small for her future. It did not show Maristella's thumb pressing once against my sleeve, quietly telling me to breathe. Sienna finally spoke, her voice sweet enough to poison tea. She asked how long this had been going on, as if she still had the right to ask. Maristella answered before I could ruin everything with honesty. She said some things begin quietly, and only look sudden to people who stopped paying attention. The table went silent. Sienna's eyes flashed. She looked at me as if I had betrayed her by becoming visible after she left. For the next 40 minutes, Maristella played the role flawlessly. She laughed softly at things I said, even when they were not funny. She asked about my mother's recovery as if it mattered in front of everyone. She told a board member that the Riverside project would have collapsed without my work. She mentioned details no one had ever credited me for: the permit crisis, the structural redesign, the investor negotiations I had handled at midnight from a hospital hallway. With every word, I felt something inside me stand up again. Sienna kept watching. At one point, she leaned toward me and whispered that this was pathetic. I looked at her, expecting the old shame to rise. But it did not. Maybe because Maristella's hand was still on my arm. Maybe because, for the first time in years, someone powerful was not using me as a tool, but standing beside me like I was worth defending. After the brunch speeches ended, Sienna followed me into the sunlit terrace corridor. Maristella stayed a few steps behind, close enough to see, far enough to let the past speak. Sienna asked if I was happy now. She said Maristella would get bored of me. She said women like that did not love men like me. And the saddest part was, once, would have believed her. But I looked through the glass doors at the ballroom, at Maristella standing alone in black among people who wanted pieces of her, and I realized something. She had not done this because she needed entertainment. She had done it because she understood humiliation. She understood what it meant to be underestimated. I told Sienna I was not trying to make her jealous. She laughed, but her eyes were wet. I told her I had spent the last year thinking her leaving proved I was not enough, but maybe it only proved she had stopped seeing me clearly. I told her I hoped she found whatever she was chasing. Then I walked away before my courage could leave. Outside, in the hotel garden, morning had become bright afternoon. The city sounded alive beyond the hedges. Maristella joined me near a fountain where sunlight moved across the water. "You handled that well," she said. I gave a tired laugh. "I lied through most of it." "No," she said. "I lied. You finally told the truth." For a while, neither of us spoke. Then I remembered the second half of her offer, the part one had ignored because pretending to date my CEO had already been insane enough. "You said you wanted one thing in return," I said. Her face changed. The confidence faded just enough for me to see the woman beneath the title. "My father is dying," she said. The words were quiet. Almost plain. But they carried more pain than any dramatic confession could have. She told me her father, Aldrich Quinn, had built the company from nothing. He had also built walls around his daughter so high she had spent her entire adult life proving she deserved a seat at a table he had already made lonely. Now he was in a private care home refusing visitors, refusing forgiveness, refusing to sign the documents that would protect the workers' pension fund after his death. "He'll listen to you," she said. "Me? He doesn't know me. He knows your work." He asked who saved Riverside. I told him the truth. I waited. Maristella looked at the fountain, not at me. "I need you to come with me today. Not as my fake boyfriend. As the only man in my company my father might respect enough to hear." That was the thing she wanted in return. Not romance. Not revenge. Not a favor that benefited her pride. She wanted help saving thousands of employees from a family war. So I went. The care home was on a hill outside the city, where afternoon light warmed the stone paths and the windows looked out over green lawns. Aldrich Quinn was thinner than I expected, sitting in a chair beside a wide window, a blanket over his knees and stubbornness carved into every line of his face. He looked at Maristella first and ignored her. Then he looked at me. "You Hale," he said. "Yes, sir." "You fixed Riverside." "With a team," I said. He gave a dry laugh. "Good answer." "False, but good." Maristella stood near the door, arms folded now, not like Sienna's defensive anger, but like someone holding herself together. Aldrich did not make the conversation easy. He questioned me for nearly an hour about contracts, payroll, debt, loyalty, sacrifice. He asked why a divorced man with hospital bills had not left for a competitor offering more money. I told him because my team depended on me, and because my mother had taught me never to abandon something just because it was difficult. At that, his eyes shifted toward Maristella. She looked down. Slowly, the old man's anger began to loosen. Not disappear. Men like him did not surrender. They eroded. By sunset, he signed the pension protection documents. Maristella turned away when he did, but I saw her wipe her cheek. Before we left, Aldrich called her name. His voice was rough, almost unwilling. He told her she had chosen well. She stiffened. He said he did not mean the company. He meant me. Neither of us corrected him. That should have been the end of the fake relationship, but life has a strange way of turning pretend moments into real questions. Over the next few weeks, Maristella and I worked late on the pension transition. We ate terrible vending machine dinners in conference rooms. She learned my mother liked lemon biscuits. I learned Maristella hated being called fearless because she was afraid almost all the time and simply moved anyway. Sienna called twice. I did not answer the first time. The second time, I listened. She cried. She apologized. She admitted seeing me with Maristella had hurt because it forced her to realize she had not left a failure, she had left a man she had stopped appreciating. I forgave her, but I did not go back. Forgiveness, I learned, is not always a doorway. Sometimes it is a window you close gently so the storm cannot keep coming in. Months later, at another daytime charity event, Maristella stood beside me again. This time, no one had asked her to pretend. My mother was there, healthy enough to complain about the flowers. The pension workers were there too, some with tears in their eyes because their futures had been saved by a signature, a conversation, and a woman brave enough to ask for help. Maristella reached for my hand in front of everyone. Not my arm. My hand. And when I looked at her, she smiled with none of the performance from that first day. No strategy. No jealousy. No audience. Just truth. Near the end of that event, I saw Sienna across the room. She raised her glass slightly. Not bitterly. Not hopefully. Just gently. I raised mine back. Some love stories end because they were never built to survive honesty. Others begin because two wounded people stop pretending they are not wounded. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your support helps stories like this reach people who still believe kindness can change the ending. And before the ending, comment this line below: real love sees your worth before the world does. That day, my CEO pretended to be my girlfriend to make my ex-wife jealous. But the one thing she wanted in return was not my pride, my loyalty, or my heart. She wanted me to help her save what her father had almost destroyed. And somehow, while helping her save thousands of futures, she saved mine too.